So I went to an early screening of Hoppers on Saturday in Times Square at their 4DX 3D screening. This was a great time. I'll be honest, I walked into Hoppers expecting a cute movie about animals, something bright, something pleasant, maybe a few laughs. What I did not expect was to walk out moved, genuinely surprised and emotional. I want to see this movie again. And I'm not being hyperbolic. This is a rare film. It feels like something from a different era of Disney, or honestly, not even a Disney studio movie at all. Hoppers follows Mabel Tanaka, an animal lover, who stumbles onto a breakthrough tech called the Hoppers program, developed by a trio of university scientists where she goes to school. Dr. Sam, Nisha, and Connor. Now, this program lets a human consciousness hop into a lifelike robotic animal, allowing you to communicate with real animals as if you actually are one. Mabel, desperate to save a beaver habitat being threatened by the smooth-talking, politically ambitious Mayor Jerry, voiced by a perfectly cast John Hamm, hops into a robotic beaver and lands headfirst into the animal kingdom, befriending King George, a charismatic beaver voiced by Bobby Moynihan, and eventually rallying the entire animal world to fight back. It sounds like it could veer into gimmick territory and, or just be straight boring. At one point, the movie itself even cracks a joke about how this is basically Avatar with beavers. And yeah, fair. James Cameron's DNA is somewhere in this premise. But what director Daniel Chong and writer Jesse Andrews actually pull off is something much more grounded and quietly human than that comparison suggests. Let's start with what you notice immediately. This movie does look beautiful. Not in the overwhelming maximalist way that some Pixar films have leaned into, the ones that build out entire cosmic dimensions or sprawling fantasy worlds to render in staggering detail. Hoppers keeps things relatively earthbound, and that restraint actually makes the animation more striking. It's why I liked it more. The glade, the super lodge, the little beaver world Mabel stumbles into. It all feels tactile and alive in a way that's delightful to sit inside. And seeing it in 4DX was absolutely worth it. Some movies, I find action films to be incredibly distracting in 4D. Sometimes, though, a horror movie, a cute animated movie, it does add to the sensory experience. That's subjective. It doesn't really have to do with the movie, but if you do want to see it in 4DX, I had a great time. The film uses dimension and movement in a way that feels designed for that kind of immersive experience. But what's most impressive is in spectacle, its craft. Director Daniel Chong and his team use the tools of animation in ways that live action simply cannot replicate. The cross-cutting between perspectives, the way the sound design shifts when you're inside a beaver versus watching from above, the timing of visual gags that only work because of how precisely they're cut. This is filmmaking that justifies the medium. It's exactly why those Disney live-action remakes feel so hollow. You can't do what Hoppers does in live action. The movie would never even get made in live action. And I hope it wouldn't. I just think any live-action adaptation is going to suck. But moving on, this movie takes real risks. Here's what surprised me. The movie gets weird and it gets dark. There are action sequences with a lot of peril and stakes involving robots and fire that I think would frighten young kids. There's a scene with a shark being carried by a flock of seagulls through a tunnel toward a moving car that is truly insane. Heavy metal for Disney. There are moments of genuine tension and sadness alongside the humor. Pixar isn't pulling any punches here, and I think that's exactly why it works. Most Disney movies are terrified of alienating anybody. You can feel the committee in them, the note-taking, the safety testing, the careful calibration of every emotional beat, so nothing ever goes too far in any direction. Hoppers doesn't feel like that. It feels like a movie that had a specific vision and followed it. The darkness is earned, the weird stuff is earned, and because of that, the emotional payoffs land, and a lot of the jokes are really funny. Compare this to Zootopia 2, which came out recently. That was a solid movie. I liked it. The noir detective structure was fun and mature, too, for a Disney movie. The returning characters are still charming. But watching a movie like Zootopia 2, you can feel the business logic underneath. After 9 years, Zootopia 2 needed to deliver something safe and satisfying to a massive built-in audience, and it did exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. Hoppers has no such obligation. It's an original story, and it moves accordingly. Free, a little strange, and deeply sincere. It's also not trying to be big. This is the thing I keep coming back to. So much of the prestige conversation around Pixar involves its biggest swings. Soul, Inside Out, Coco, Encanto. These are movies that build entire metaphysical universes around huge philosophical questions. What does it mean to find your purpose? What are emotions? How do we carry the weight of our ancestors? These are remarkable films, but they come with a certain grandeur, a scale, a need to be about something enormous. And Hoppers is not that, and that's precisely what makes it feel like a breath of fresh air. It reminds me weirdly of Up, though not in the way you might expect. The premise of Up was high concept, a house lifted by balloons, talking dogs, and adventure through South American wilderness, but the emotional core was simple. An old man, a kid, grief, and the slow process of learning to be alive again. Hoppers has that same quality. The technology, the animal kingdom, politics, the villain, these are the scaffolding. The actual story is about a girl who cares deeply about living things, trying to do the right thing in a world that makes it very hard to do the right thing. It's rooted in something familiar, something close to our own world, and that familiarity makes it hit harder. There's also a specific Easter egg late in the film that is clearly a love letter to Up, and I will not spoil it except to say yes, I was very happy about this. Also, the characters are fully human, even the villain. One of the biggest traps in animated movies, especially ones with a clear environmental message, is flattening the villain into a cartoon. Make him greedy, make him evil. Done. Mayor Jerry, voiced by John Hamm, is not that. He plays him as a man who has genuinely convinced himself he's doing the right thing. He's charming, he's political, he takes care of his mom, he talks about economic development and infrastructure and 4 minutes saved on a commute as if these are, obviously good things. He's not wrong that people need roads, he's just catastrophically wrong about what he's willing to sacrifice for them. That complexity carries through the whole cast. Piper Curda, who voices Mabel, brings a real energy to the role. She's funny and impulsive and also quietly earnest in the moments that need it the most. Bobby Moynihan's King George is the perfect foil, pompous, lovable, genuinely regal in his own ridiculous way. Meryl Streep shows up as an insect queen. Every character here feels like they exist for reasons beyond serving the plot. They have texture, they have blind spots. Even the secondary animals Mabel encounters, Loaf, Ellen, the various kingdom representatives, feel like they have lives happening off screen. That's rare, and it's one of the things that separates Hoppers from movies that are technically competent but emotionally hollow. And also, the movie is inclusive without making a whole thing about it. This is something I noticed and I did appreciate. Mabel Tanaka is a Japanese-American protagonist. The cast is diverse. The themes of this movie are collective action, unity, listening to communities that get steamrolled by development, the hubris of assuming that progress is always worth the cost. These are political ideas, and the movie doesn't pretend they aren't. But they're delivered through story, through character, through the texture of what's actually happening on screen. You feel the message because you care about these animals and the girl, not because the movie pauses to explain the message to you. That balance, that inclusive without being overbearing, political without being preachy, is genuinely difficult to pull off. Hoppers pulls it off, and it's also so funny. And I'll be real with you, I don't think this movie's going to make $1 billion. It's too odd, too specific, too quietly its own thing. This isn't Inside Out 2. There's probably not going to be a massive Hoppers ride at Disney parks. Maybe a little game, maybe a Mabel Tanaka plushie and a King George pop figure if we're lucky. But I think in 5 or 10 years, people are going to talk about Hoppers the way they talk about Luca or Turning Red. Movies that didn't have the cultural footprint of the blockbusters, but landed for the people who found them in a way that few big studio films manage. It felt personal. It felt like it was made by people who cared about what they were making. And fittingly, given that Demi Shi, director of Turning Red, was an executive producer, as were Peter Sohn and Pete Docter, the man who gave us Up, and Peter Sohn, who did Elemental, he produced this. There is a through line here. This is what Pixar looks like when it's operating from love rather than obligation. I would see Hoppers again tomorrow, and when it hits Disney Plus, I will watch it again. It was very good.